Good morning, or morning still, I guess. All of you, thank you for joining this CSR Europe session from its Sustainability Open Day. You know, we have a series of 3 webinars today, and this session focuses on the hot topic. And if I can ask everyone to put on mute so we don't have a background noise. We want to focus this time on the hot topic that is there on the sustainability agenda, and that is sustainable sourcing and sustainable supply chain. We will not talk about the regulation as such, be it the German due diligence law, the French, the EU, in the UK, the upcoming legislation. You all know a lot is coming or has come in the direction of companies, and we all, I think, are at a stage of trying to understand what it means from companies and what kind of requirements they are and how to react. But we want to explore with you further how companies can use and leverage that compliance with regulation to create a real positive impact on the environment, people and communities, to have really better sustainable supply chain, and how we therefore also helps companies to become better, more competitive. That is actually the take we want to give to this webinar with the title Unlocking Impact with Sustainable Supply Chain Due Diligence. You have seen my picture more than enough, so I will go to the next slide. I don't like that picture. It's a webinar type of thing, so you have seen that it's being recorded. That's mainly for our own purpose, and then to spread to people who could not attend and ask for the recording. Please use social media if you want to say something about what you pick up. Use the chat function, and that I would really like to encourage in this session, to ask questions, to give comments, to point us out to certain links that are worthwhile for the audience to look at, etc. So the engagement is important for us. And on the next slide, yeah, if you want to speak up, please raise your hand, and then at that moment unmute yourself, turn on your camera. But as said, you can also write in the chat, but we really would like to encourage. So let me start with some short introduction on the next slide. As CSR Europe, we believe strongly that sustainability leadership is not only about how good a company is in sustainability. Of course, it's important and it's the basis of everything. We have this kind of 3 circles of engagement. But our leadership model says, of course, you have to integrate sustainability in your core business operations, in your core business process. And that's a level of maturity is very important to start with. And it's a kind of continuous improvement element. But in order to achieve impact for your own business operations and in your supply chain, you will need to collaborate with others, because only then you can get to the scale that is needed. Alone, you can do only so much and at a certain cost. Together with others, you can do it probably cheaper, but mainly also with more impact, you would hope. And the last but not least, and the influence is a little bit reductive here to the EU policy agenda and EU sustainability agenda, but it's actually a wider engagement of, and we're starting to understand the importance of that, the wider engagement with stakeholders, not only policymakers, but also civil society, ecosystem, to create the right ecosystems for sustainability impact. And yesterday, and maybe Luciana will say something later about We Drive Sustainability. No, the day before yesterday, we had a big stakeholder dialogue. And it was so enriching to be able to talk, and that's what the car makers also said, to talk with WWF, Human Rights Watch, etc., in order to understand where are we going, what can we do, what should we do better, etc. So this influence and engagement part is very important in a leadership model that we want to portray. If I go to the next slide, if I come then to the core of what we are discussing today, and that is the challenge of sustainable value chains, you all know there is a lot of stakeholder expectation around. There is a lot of regulatory requirement pushing also companies or allowing also the level playing field. And more and more we see companies having it integrated in their own purpose, in their own policies, etc., in order to achieve more sustainable value chains. But from a compliance perspective, it's relatively easy, and that's why the easy is between brackets. It's relatively easy to check on your tier one suppliers, and it can give you some confidence on where is our risk, what kind of countermeasures or corrective actions our supplier, tier one supplier, has to take, etc. But it's a very individual one-to-one approach. And the question is then maybe the risk is managed, but is impact achieved? Our question is more, how can we benefit and how do companies benefit from scale and experience to work with business partners, with other stakeholders, and how maybe to develop alliances for more impact in this field? So going beyond the individual compliance. That is something. But we see one effect of the regulation, and maybe Anneke from RAID can say something later about that. An effect of the legislation, of the avalanche of legislation that is coming, is that companies invest a lot in the checking the box on, did we check our tier one suppliers and are they all in the gold and silver, or I don't know what kind of scoring, so we are assured. But that's maybe not the real purpose and direction of supply chain due diligence. If I go to the next slide, and I talked about tier one, the complexity then comes, and we all know, especially the downstream companies, probably a lot of risk and a lot of issues are related to more upstream activity that are further away, and there are all kind of efforts ongoing. Can we map fully our supply chain to identify? But it always starts from the same story. Can we identify the risk in order to contain it, in order to countermeasure it, in order to avoid it sometimes, which would be the bigger risk, I would personally think. But there are a lot of complexities related to that, especially on supply chain mapping, on the data points, in automotive and in other sectors. There are attempts on that, but it bumps into a number of challenges. But that is all an approach that is based on, if I go to the next slide, on how can we understand, where can we identify the risks, so what can we do individually as a company? And it's an important starting point, but I think with CSR Europe, what we try to portray is a kind of more multi-layer approach to impact, because that's the real purpose. That's what we share with civil society, with policymakers, and with other companies. How do you get a better impact throughout your supply chain work? And of course, you need to understand the risks, and you need to countermeasure at an individual level with your supplier at that level. But maybe another element of looking at it is each of the companies have sustainability policies, sustainability direction, targets, strategies, etc. An overlooked element maybe is the supplier engagement element. How can I work with my supplier, engage with my supplier that he or she contributes to my sustainability goals? And that's another way of working on supply chain sustainability. And the last one then that we also will explore today is how can we work with competitors or throughout our value chains to have a more common impact. Those are the things we would like to explore in this webinar with you today. And without further ado, I will go to the agenda and present the different speakers that kindly accepted to be with us. And so I will stop with this introduction. And I really thank Carlo. We go now for a longer time already, Carlo, but I'm really glad that you are there. And actually, I asked Carlo from Telefonica, because last week or 2 weeks ago, you published something that caught my attention. And so I contacted him and said, Carlo, you need to present this to our webinar, which he kindly accepted on the short term. So thank you for that. So Carlo will give a keynote speech on the approach of Telefonica and will touch upon different of these elements. And then I'm really glad to have this panel also exploring the different elements that I showed in the previous slide. Laura Roger Giuliani from Solvay, Luciana from our own team, but working in Drive Sustainability, Anneke van Woudenberg from RAID, and we think that Louis Watoun will get up at 6 o'clock in the morning in Canada, because he's there. He's based in DRC. He's the board chairman of Kipushi Corporation, and also of we work with him in Congo with the Chambre des Mines, where he's the president. So we hope he puts on his alarm at 5:30 so he can join us at 12 o'clock for this panel session. And I also want to thank Amelie Werbrugk from SES Satellites, which is one of our newest members in CSR Europe, and welcome and immediately engaging. So that's very good. Who will do the closing keynote, explaining what SES does for the moment, what she picked up from this meeting, etc. And I hope my closing remarks will not be necessary anymore. That's the agenda for today. And without further ado, Carlo, I give the floor to you, and I think Martina will also help you on the slides. Carlo, please.
Great. Thank you very much, Stefan. And yeah, hello everyone. Buenos dias from Madrid, Spain. First of all, many thanks to CSR Europe for organizing this fantastic event, and yeah, many thanks also for inviting Telefonica to speak today on a session about due diligence. I am very happy to be with you today and elaborate a bit on our sustainability due diligence process and our latest impact assessment in particular. If it is okay for you, I'll spare you the 5 minutes corporate speech about Telefonica. All you need to know basically for the purpose of this talk is that we are one of the leading international telecommunications operators with presence in Europe, Latin America. Other than that, very similar business to the telecom operators you probably know from your own countries. So let's directly dive into what I would like to talk to you about in the next 15-20 minutes. First, I'd like to present to you the main features of our due diligence approach, an approach that we are following quite some time already, not only since the
Sorry, Carlo, you are on mute for the moment. You are
just now or for already a longer time?
30 seconds only.
Okay, then maybe I start with the first point. So what I would like to present first is the main features of our due diligence approach. It is an approach that we have been following for quite some time already, not only since there has been discussions on regulatory initiatives on that topic. Second, I'd like to share some insights into our latest global impact assessment, which is some sort of, I would say, the basis for the setup, design of our entire due diligence process. And I'll explain in a second why this is the case. Third and fourth, actually, as well, I'd like to focus on one particular part of our value chain where we have potential impacts to address, that is the supply chain. So upstream, present our approach, both the risk management part, but also the more proactive engagement with other telcos and also with our suppliers to really, let's say, transform the ICT supply chain in a more sustainable way, as Stefan already alluded to in his introductory remarks. And lastly, Stefan asked me to share some reflections, some lessons learned on due diligence in general and our impact assessment in particular. Maybe just to manage expectations, these are rather some, I would say, random reflections, observations, no coherent story, but hopefully they're of interest to you and maybe trigger a debate in the panel. So if we go to the next slide, our due diligence approach already in place for more than a decade, albeit evolving, obviously, hopefully improving, based on international standards, first and foremost on the UN guiding principles. So we follow the internationally accepted due diligence steps. We have a policy adopted at the highest level. We conduct impact assessment on a regular basis in close consultation with our right holders, stakeholders. Explain that in more detail in a second. We integrate the results of our impact assessment into our policies and processes. We assess the effectiveness of our due diligence process and also report on that in various reports. First and foremost, obviously, in our integrated annual report, and we have a complaint and remedy mechanism. So the typical, I'd say, due diligence steps. Maybe an important feature of our approach is that we speak of value chain due diligence, not just supply chain due diligence, for the simple reason that as a telecom operator, you do not only have potential impacts upstream, but also downstream. Yeah? So in relation with our clients, keywords here are data privacy, security, freedom of expression, etc. Let's come to that also in a second. Also important that for quite some time already we speak about sustainability due diligence, not just human rights, and this is because, or this is not just because the European directive does so, but because there are, I would say, obvious interdependencies between human rights and environmental issues. Yeah, for example, a clean and healthy environment is integral to the enjoyment of a wide range of human rights, including the rights to life, to health, food, water, etc. Yeah. If we go to the next slide, I'd suggest that I elaborate a bit on the second step of our due diligence process, so our impact assessment, because as I said already earlier, impact assessments are some sort of the basis for our entire setup design of our due diligence process. Why is this the case? Because these impact assessments, or rather the results of the impact assessments, they tell us what to focus on. Yeah, and what do we do in particular in concrete? The starting point of our impact assessments is what we call our global impact assessments. Yeah? We do them every 3 to 4 years based on the methodology proposed by the UN Guiding Principles with the help of a specialized consultancy on that topic. And the overall objective of these impact assessments at global level is to identify the most relevant potential impacts that result out of our business activity. So we get a list of a number of potential impacts, and what we do then with these impacts, amongst other things, is that we integrate them into our enterprise risk management. So we have a specific human rights risk against which all our markets have to report on a biannual basis. Yeah, so we check in each and every of our markets as to whether the potential impacts that we identified on a global level, as to whether they materialize also at the local level. As I said, we do this on a biannual basis, and if we see in these impact assessments that there is a particular concern in a given region, we also do specific local impact assessment. And if we see that there is a specific concern considering a concrete topic, then we also do thematic impact assessments. Just to give an example, thematic impact assessments, we did one a while ago on artificial intelligence and its impact on human rights. And and these already are also feedback to the global impact assessments that we do, as I said earlier, every 3 to 4 years. I think this is important just for you to understand the overall architecture of the impact assessments that we do within Telefonica, because I mean, one thing is to do them at the global level, but often, the local context is very important when determining whether a given impact really materializes. At times, even the additional impacts you have to consider. If we go to the next slide, the global impact assessments, as you have just seen, they are really key for us for the entire due diligence process. And as I said, we do them on a regular basis, and we just finished the latest one at the end of last year, and we published a brief summary. I think it was a couple of weeks ago, the one that Stefan also mentioned, he asked me to provide you with a brief overview of that impact assessment, and also obviously the results that we got and what we will do next. Maybe just a few words on the objective methodology of that impact assessment. And so in a nutshell, it consists of 4 steps. The first one was to identify potential negative impacts. This is maybe also important, that our impact assessments, they rather look at the adverse effects. So we also have another report which looks rather on the positive effects of our business activity, so the contribution to the SDGs, etc. But this is rather from this adverse impact perspective. In the end, after a project of over half a year, we identified 18 issues where we could have a potential impact. As I said earlier, we took a holistic approach, so not just human rights, but also environmental issues. What we then did in a second step is that we evaluated the relevance, salience of these 18 issues on the basis of severity and probability. This is really important. We did that not as Telefonica, but we did so by talking also obviously to our internal stakeholders, so the various departments involved in the due diligence process, but also to external right holders and stakeholders, as well as experts, because as the name already suggests, you cannot do an impact assessment without talking to those that are potentially affected. So really you have to talk to right holders and stakeholders. And this I will explain in a bit more detail in a second, also how these 18 issues are distributed on those 2 dimensions. But what we then did is also in the third step is to analyze as to whether we have the policies and processes in place to address the issues that we identified, as to whether there are gaps. And we took into consideration, obviously, also the regulatory requirements, the new ones or the upcoming ones, and also stakeholder expectations. And as a last and final step, this is where we are right now, is we have received a couple of recommendations. We are now coming up with an action plan to further improve our due diligence process. So this is, let's say, the basic steps methodology of our impact assessment. If we go to the next slide, focus on the first steps. So what were the potential impacts that we identified? I won't read them out individually, but when I had to explain the results of this impact assessment to our management, what I did is that I said we have, let's say, like 4 clusters of issues. One, and this is not a surprise given the fact that we are a digital company, telecom company with a lot of data, is one cluster of digital rights, so privacy, security, freedom of expression, protection of minors in the digital space, etc. So there's one on digital rights. One also, this is, I would say, even sector agnostic workers' right, especially so in the supply chain. One cluster on environmental issues, climate change, biodiversity, circular economy, etc. And one on ethics and governance, so corruption, bribery, fiscal responsibility, etc. I mean, needless to say, this is a simplification, but just for you to get the bigger picture. If we go to the next slide, this is now the second step. As I said earlier, not all these impacts are equally important given our business activity. This is why we evaluated these 18 issues on the basis of how severe the impact is in case it materializes and how probable it is that it materializes. This is the commonly accepted methodology proposed by the Union Guiding Principles, and also taken up by CSRD, the European Sustainability Reporting Standards, also the Directive on Due Diligence. So this is in line with all what is coming in regulatory terms. We did this, as I said earlier, not alone, but talking to experts, and most importantly, also to our stakeholders. And the outcome you can see here on the matrix in the upper right corner. You see a lot of what I earlier called digital rights. Again, not a big surprise given our business activity, but also the more common, let's say, topics in supply chain management, like working conditions, health and safety, etc. If we go to the next slide, I think I have another slide. Yeah, it's basically another illustration of the result. I won't explain it in detail, but I like it because it tells you where along the value chain which impact is more relevant and which are the corresponding impacted groups. This helps us also when trying to manage these potential impacts. Next slide, please. This is the third step, because we wanted to check whether our due diligence process and all the corresponding policies and processes adequately address the potential impacts. I cannot share with you the detailed results, but the overall evaluation was good. And some of the reasons why we received a, let's say, satisfactory score I mentioned on this slide. For instance, we have a policy adopted and supervised at the highest level. This impact assessment architecture and where we integrate the issues that we identify in global impact assessments into our enterprise risk management was mentioned. The fact that we have a human rights by design process, so really in the design phase of new products and services, our product managers need to complete a questionnaire so that they already take into consideration some of these aspects already in the early stages, where it is possible still to really influence and change characteristics of a product and a service. So there were some reasons why it was said that our system is fit for purpose. Having said that, and this is also true, there's always room for improvement. We are currently prioritizing the recommendations that we received to come up with an action plan to further improve our process. This is, I think, already. I think we can go to the next slide, which doesn't have a lot of information, but this is basically where we are right now. We're coming up with an action plan with concrete measures that we want to take to further improve our due diligence process. One topic which I think every company would say where there is room for improvement, and which is also the topic of this webinar, this session, is supply chain management. Also, we have to keep working on that topic. This is why I would like to spend the last minutes focusing on that part of the value chain. If we go to the next slide, a few words on our general supply chain approach, which we are now, as I said, also revising, updating. But the general logic will stay the same. I always say that we have two pillars in our supply chain approach. One is rather the risk management part, which is something you have to do. But we also have a second pillar, which we call the engagement part, where we really proactively work with suppliers, also with other telcos, to, as Stefan said earlier, really to generate impact and change and transform our supply chain in a sustainable way. A few words on the risk management. I mean, this is very common, I think, to most companies, even not only telecom operators. Step one, we have a supply chain policy with which all all our suppliers have to accept if they want to work with us. Yeah, it becomes then part of a contractual relationship. There we have specified all our requirements, etc. We work, just to give you an idea, roughly with 10,000 suppliers every year. So they all accept this policy. Then in a second step, to classify a bit our suppliers into different potential risk categories, we do an internal analysis on the basis of the products and services they provide to us, and then try to identify those that have the highest potential risk. In the second step, and the third step, then we ask from those that have the highest potential risk to provide us with a previously an EcoVadis score, now an Integrity Next score. And on the basis of this score, then we take corresponding actions. The most drastic one is that we block that supplier in our procurement platform if this score, so we see there is no real due diligence in place. This is the harshest measure we take. But others are, for example, the fourth step also that we do audits. But as I said, this is just the, I think Stefan would call it the compliance part. But on top of that, we have a engagement part where we engage with suppliers on concrete topics, to work as partners and really drive change. If we go to the next slide, I'm almost finished. Is that, as Stefan said earlier, as an individual company, you can only achieve so much, but in collaboration with others, with other telcos, with other suppliers, you can truly achieve impact. This is what we do, for instance, in the telco initiative JAC, Joint Alliance for CSR. It's the International Association of Telecom Operators to drive sustainability in the ICT supply chain. In total, we have some 26 by now, so a very significant percentage of global telecommunication supply chain spend. And we work together in non-competitive areas to promote sustainability in our supply chain. We do this through a variety of measures. Best practice sharing, obviously, among ourselves, telcos, but also bad practice sharing, which is at times even more interesting. We do audits, and we also share audits. So it's a very efficient way the idea is basically that not all the 26 telcos audit the same supplier, but we divide the suppliers among ourselves, and share the results after that. The supplier only has to suffer one audit, which then is valid for all the sector. Yeah? This is the idea. We provide capacity building to our suppliers. We have what we call the JAC Academy. We engage with suppliers on key topics, and we also work on common tools, methodologies, and solutions. And we really believe in this collaborative approach, because it's just true that if you try to do it yourself as Telefonica, you do not have the leverage. If you work with your telcos, it is not only that you have more leverage, it's also that it helps our suppliers, because they're then not confronted with very different asks by their clients, but it's aligned to some extent. So the last slide, some reflections. As I said, random reflection, not a coherent story. The first one: don't dismiss compliance with new requirements at basic. What I want to say with that is that you often hear and read, and also in this introductory remarks, that as a company you need to go beyond compliance to truly generate positive impacts. And this is obviously true. But the truth also is that only complying with these, I think Stefan called it avalanche of regulations, so taxonomy, CSRD, due diligence, etc. All these regulations, whose objectives I share, require a tremendous effort within companies. Yeah? So it's not just compliance. It's really, we all that we work in companies, we are suffering right now because it's a lot, but it's necessary. But having said that, I also think this is the second point, that impact can be achieved by this regulatory checkbox mentality. This is why I say that we need to really follow the spirit and not the letter of the law, in pursuit of wider, broader strategy and impact. In this context, again, my call to collaborate. I know there are very magnificent sector initiatives to drive sustainability in supply chain. We'll hear about one in a few seconds, especially to go beyond tier 1, which is easier, obviously tier 1, but the risks lie down the supply chain, and this is where really the challenge is. On impact assessments, already said earlier, you need to talk to right holders, stakeholders, otherwise it's not a impact assessment, but rather a risk assessment. And just an advice, because this is something we experience, is that you should use the impact assessment results for your impact materiality. So the inside-out perspective in the double materiality analysis, which the CSRD is currently asking. I think it's very important to ensure the alignment between these two processes. Last point, reporting is necessary, but insufficient to achieve impact. What I want to say here is that reporting and actions are two different things. Sustainability actions, they can lead to reporting, and reporting can also, how can I put it, uncover the need for new action. However, reporting can also be just reporting. So we might end up with a lot of disclosures, metrics, calculations, but still lack substantive sustainability actions. And with this, I'd like to close and thank you again for the invitation. I hope I haven't taken up too much time.
You didn't take too much time, and you generated a number of questions in the chat. And so thank you for, you are right in what you say on the compliance is important. And that's why I wanted you to present today, because you created, I think with Telefonica, other companies might also have that, but a systematic methodology that moves from risk to impact, that emphasizes the value chain, that looks at local level and gives that a position. You emphasize it in your conclusion as well. So I think it's very important. In your last remark, don't dismiss compliance, and you showed it's a lot of work for companies, and you show how it can be set up, and that is very appreciated. One of the questions I came across with, and I'm afraid we cannot tackle all the questions in the time, Carlo, but if you could spend some time looking at them later and maybe respond in the chat yourself as well. But one of the first questions that came, if you could give some example of actions, what do you do? Because you explained the system, you identified the risks, you see the impacts. What is it that you do then? What kind of, someone asked for examples of actions that you do based on applying this system, if I may summarize it like that. In an individual way, you talked a little bit about contract exclusion, but also maybe there is supplier improvement. There is maybe collaborative actions you take in certain areas. Could you give some examples of countermeasures of the things that come out of the system? That would be very helpful.
Yeah, if it's okay, I can talk about an action that is a result of the impact assessment, but an action that we do together with others, because I think there's really where we can generate some impact. For example, we have seen in our impact assessment that we do have, as a telco, an impact also on climate change. Not so much by our own operations, but rather indirectly. So what is commonly known as Scope 3. So then you can ask ourselves, so how can we address that? So in our case, more than 80% of our emissions are beyond our direct operations. So we cannot do it alone. So we need to collaborate with our suppliers first. This was the first, obviously, finding. But if we, as Telefonica, individually now talk to our most important suppliers, we can only achieve so much. What we did within JAC, within our sector initiative, is to align our let's say our asks in that and also align our methodologies, because as I said earlier, similar to the logic of audits, it is very difficult for suppliers if they are confronted with a multitude of very different requirements asked by their clients. So what we did in JAC, and Telefonica is leading the work stream on climate change within the sector initiative, is that we between the 26 telco operators, and this is not an easy endeavor, I can tell you, to some extent align what we think should or are good practices, best practices that our suppliers could adopt to really drive down emissions in our supply chain, so that our suppliers, they are not confronted with a very distinct list of requirements, but they can focus their efforts on action and not so much on reporting against these very different asks. We spent some time within JAC to come up with a list of best practices. It's important to stress that we are talking about best practice and not requirements, because also antitrust issues are there, very, very important. And we published a report, which I'm happy to share also after the webinar, where we list these 10 best practices that we think suppliers can adopt. And by adopting these 10 points, best practices, they automatically more or less satisfy the asks of all their clients in the telco industry. This way, I think this is an example of how you really can impact working together with others. And we also now, as a next step, we want to to classify these our suppliers on the basis of a common methodology to provide them with some guidance. Basically establish maturity levels between these suppliers, and also offer capacity building measures so they can move up the ladder of maturity to the one that then also they are aligned with our objectives. Because I mean, we all, also Telefonica, we have very ambitious climate targets. These targets are linked to our financing. We have issued sustainable bonds, etc. So we really need to achieve these objectives, but we only can achieve them if we collaborate with our suppliers. And we think, the collaborative approach, also one which is propagated by CSR Europe, are definitely the way to go. Even though obviously also individually you have to do your homework.
Exactly, Carlo. Can I refer you to the chat, because there are some very interesting questions, but we don't have the time. But for example, one of the questions relate to what is in it for the supplier, and how do you motivate them to engage on that? And if maybe put a link also of the report you made with JAC, you can put in the chat as well. That would be very helpful. I'm sorry, I need to move on in the framework of a webinar of 90 minutes. But thank you very much for this presentation and for your engagement on this topic. And I would like to go to my panelists, and really I'm so happy with Laura, Luciana, Anneke, and Louis Watum. Good morning, Louis, in Canada. You made it very early, so thank you for joining. But first I will start with two more examples from what are efforts made by companies, or with collaborative efforts by companies. Then I will go to Anneke, and then I will go to Louis. So Laura, without further ado, Solvay has also developed a program, is working on supplier engagement as well. Could you maybe give in a few words and in a few slides also some examples of what Solvay is currently doing, and where on what does it collaborate with others on this agenda of supply chain sustainability? Laura is the head of procurement sustainability in Solvay, and so knows very well on the system she's building. Laura, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Stefan. And maybe I will start by quickly introducing you Solvay One Planet ambition, which is actually our sustainability roadmap. And it's crafted around 3 pillars. The first one being protecting the climate. And here we have the ambition of becoming carbon neutral by 2040. We have also our science-based targets approved for Scope 1, 2, and 3. And we have the ambition of reducing our Scope 3 emissions by 24% by 2030. Then the second pillar is about preserving natural resources. And here we have the ambition of accelerating circular business models. And this means increasing circular sourcing coming from bio-based or recycled material. And then our third pillar, it's about fostering better life, which means improving social impact in our supply chain, and also developing inclusive businesses such as our Sustainable War initiative that I'll develop maybe further. So to support this ambition, we have launched back in 2021 with the support also of CSR Europe. So we launched a supplier engagement program with the objective of fostering sustainability innovations from our suppliers and also create shared value with them. So it was organized, the program was organized through a series of events together with them, and the objective was firstly to raise their awareness on our target linked to Solvay One Planet. And also we made it very clear to them that we need them to actually achieve those objectives, because without them we won't perform that. And then we also invited our suppliers to showcase their best practices and also best practices related to our key sustainability topics, which are so reducing the carbon footprint of our supply chain, so scope 3 obviously, waste valorization, circular economy, diversity, equity and inclusion, and human rights and social impact in the supply chain. And so finally, we did a call for action, and we asked all the suppliers to participate to submit concrete innovation projects linked to those 5 topics. And actually, it was a great success because we received about 70 project ideas in total. So really, I would say a quite rich program, which really reflects our ambition with the supplier, which is really moving from simply buying from them to building together with them.
And actually, if I may interrupt on that stage, we had this question to Carla, what is in it for the supplier? And actually this example is an example of, or this supplier engagement answers that question in your supply chain sustainability and on your own sustainability agenda. You created some way of doing this, is my understanding.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Could I ask you a second question, because you do more than this, and this is a supplier engagement program. Is there also a way on direct impact? You mentioned the sustainable guar. I think you have a slide on that. Maybe we can look at that. And what is sustainable guar and why did Solvay do that?
Okay, so yeah, I believe indeed that sustainable guar is a great initiative or a great example of collaboration across the value chain with a positive social impact. So if you're not familiar with guar, what it is, it's a plant which is a natural source of polymers. So it's mainly grown in India and mainly in Rajasthan, where about 80% of the population depends on agriculture there. And they go through with extreme weather conditions and frequent droughts. So back to 2016, so 7 years ago, we launched with L'Oréal, which is a key customer of Solvay. So we launched an inclusive program to try to improve the livelihood of smallholder guar bean farmers in India, and mostly female farmers. So the program was based on 3 pillars: agronomy with training on agroforestry, climate smart agriculture practices, and it's actually showed great success, where we were able to improve drastically the guar yields. Then the second pillar was about social, with training on health, hygiene, nutrition, and we also implemented kitchen garden for guar farmers, and finally natural resource management. So 7 years after the kickoff of this program, what have we achieved? Well, we have other major customers who joined also, who signed up for the program. So you see here we have also Procter & Gamble, Henkel on top of L'Oréal, and we are also developing with further customers. We have now 12,600 farmers enrolled in the program, including 3,500 women. And 2,500 of them have now a kitchen garden, which provide them fresh vegetables for the family. And even more important, we have drastically improved their livelihood conditions. So to me, this WAR initiative is a great example of collaboration of different actors across the value chain with a positive social impact.
No, thank you. And that's also, when I was listening to it now again, the reason why we asked it for. But also, Carlo mentioned the need to go local. Well, this is very local. You localized very much, and then your customers apparently followed on this effort. And this is direct impact oriented. This is not a check the box type of approach, but it's on direct impact. So thank you for sharing that with us. I really have to run through all these examples, but this helps us to understand better where we want to go. And I would like to move to Luciana Rendace from our CSR Europe team, but mainly and senior project manager in Drive Sustainability, the automotive partnership. And I want to also link that to what Carlo introduced earlier. Jack is a similar collaborative platform within the telecoms, well, also in the automotive sector. It exists. We have asked Luciana not to talk so much about the common assessment tools that are there and that are shared between suppliers. I saw some questions around that in the chat. Is that possible? Yes, it is possible. And maybe later we should put a link on Drive Sustainability to this in the chat as well, so you can see the basics. But the main questions to Luciana are also related to this impact and to the local element, because one of the challenges on supply chain sustainability is you are sitting in if I talk about automotives, you are sitting in Tokyo or in Wolfsburg or in Munich or in Detroit, but your mined materials come from DRC, South Africa, Indonesia, etc. How do you engage on that, and how do you make sure that not only you understand the risk, but that there's also potential for improvement? Luciana, can you look at that? How does that collaboration between OEMs look into this kind of upstream risk and engagement? The floor is yours.
Sure. Good morning, everyone, and very thankful for being here today with you. So before answering to your question, I have just few slides on Drive Sustainability for the ones who are not familiar with this initiative. So as you mentioned, Drive Sustainability is a partnership of 16 automotive companies working on supply chain sustainability. You can see our members on this slide and also our strategy. So the key thematic areas on which we focus, which are sustainable raw materials, workforce well-being, so everything related to human rights due diligence and grievance mechanism. And of course, we also cover environmental topics like carbon neutrality and circular value chain. And how we do that, in the next slide, you can see what's our integrated approach. The first step is to set clear direction. We do this through the automotive industry guiding principles, which are also endorsed and developed in collaboration with AAG and its OEMs. AAG is the American Automotive Action Group, where we also we can find Nissan, for example, General Motors, etc. And then the second step is to check how suppliers are actually complying with our guiding principles. And for this, Stefan already briefly explained our common sustainability assessment questionnaire that is used by the 16 OEMs, and it's an incredible tool to assess the sustainability performance of tier 1 suppliers. Now we have also tier 1 suppliers that cascade it down to tier 2 suppliers. And in 10 years of activity, we have reached 120,000 supplier plans. But as Stefan was mentioning, when it comes to responsible sourcing and the risks related to raw materials, another approach is needed, also due to the lack of transparency in the supply chains. So what we did was to take to look at the top producing countries and producing companies for a given material and break down the value chain. In the next slide, you can see a bit better what I'm talking about. We did this through the Raw Material Outlook, which is a platform, an online platform providing information about 18 raw materials. I'm happy also to announce that yesterday we have added chromium, copper, lithium, niobium, and silica. And basically, by breaking down the value chain, and I insist there, we don't look only on the supply chain, but we also look at logistics, warehousing, recycling, and use. We've been able to collect information on all the materialized, but also the potential risk. What does it mean? That we also looked at the mining chemical processes to extract or refine or recycle this material to understand what are the potential risks for which we do not have evidence. And to assess and classify, prioritize these risks, we also used the concept of saliency that was already mentioned by Carlos. So the combination of likelihood and severity. And this, in the next slide, but the question there was also, okay, we are analyzing and identifying the risks, but then what we do about the risks that we have identified. And indeed, all this intelligence that we have built through with the OEM serves for individual company action, so as a basis for further due diligence by OEMs, but in Drive, the central part is this collective automotive action. So where Drive sustainability as a leverage to exercise on upstream actors. And we do this mainly through two actions, which are stakeholder engagement and on-the-ground project. In the next slide, you can see a bit what are the actors that we are engaging with. We have continuous engagement with industry associations like the Cobalt Institute, Nickel Institute, also the International Lithium Association, but also with the standard setting initiatives, because we do believe that standards have a crucial role, at least as a provider of data on the upstream part of the value chain. And of course, we also have engaged with civil society and local communities like Human Rights Watch, Global Witness, Inclusive Development International. And we have two on-the-ground projects. The first one is the one that you can see on the slide, Extractives for Sustainability, which was run by CSR Europe, and now we're kicking off another project in partnership with Industrial, a global federation of trade unions, where we will focus on the nickel supply chain in Indonesia, and by looking at how we automakers can capture the perspective of workers further down the supply chain, further up the supply chain. So this is in a nutshell what we are doing on responsible sourcing and Drive.
Thank you very much, Luciana, for presenting this. I encourage everyone in the chat to further react and to ask questions, but my two other members of the panel are a little bit from a different nature. And because we heard about through Carlo how setting up systems and process, and for example, Solvay also has similar systems, but we asked also Solvay, supplier engagement, what role does that play? And the going local and upstream, how do you deal with that to create impact? Were questions both to Laura and Luciana. Now we were wondering, or we wanted to hear from two different actors in a way, from a non-governmental organization, Anneke van Woudenberg, but also Louis Watoum as an upstream company producer, as a materials producer, amongst other countries in DRC, looking at all these efforts. Is that the right way? Is that not specifically about this, but you know, other companies and other sector associations and sector things go in similar ways. Anneke, let me start with you. You are leading an important NGO that helped us, by the way, through the work you do, the reports you wrote on the work we are doing on mining with drive sustainability. You set out the direction, you set out the expectations, you highlight the shortcomings of what companies are doing. Is this the right direction? Is it enough? And what is needed was the question to you, Anneke, and I'm sure you have an answer to that one. So please.
Thank you, Stefan, and thank you for inviting me to participate on this. Look, let me start with perhaps a positive, which is that there's been huge developments, obviously, on how to implement due diligence, on responsible sourcing, and on companies beginning to think about this and really developing this architecture. But there's, of course, a big difference between the architecture, the tick boxes, the requirements, and what actually happens on the ground. And I'm from a civil society group called Rights and Accountability and Development, RAID. We're a corporate watchdog group. We do investigations in the field to determine ongoing human rights violations and environmental harms. And one of the things we looked at recently was battery raw materials, and particularly looking at the cobalt supply chain going into electric vehicles around the world. And we chose that particular one because we'd heard considerable noises, testimonies and accounts of significant worker rights violations at cobalt mines in the DRC. And I'll put in the chat later just the link to our research findings so you can see those. But I think what's most important for perhaps many of you listening to this panel discussion is that when we looked at the architecture that electric vehicle companies and others who were using the raw materials had, on paper, these looked very good. But when we really went to dig down to see how were these being applied, we found some significant weaknesses and problems. And in a nutshell, what we found in Congo was significant exploitation of workers, particularly subcontracted laborers, who made up about 57% of the workforce at these large industrial cobalt mines. These workers had extremely low pay, faced racism, abuse, physical violence, huge issues with health and safety, and lacked basic medical care, which was a requirement of the law in Congo. So significant workers' rights and human rights issues. But the audits and the questions on due diligence that were being implemented were extremely narrow. In fact, most companies were only implementing the OECD guidance on commodities coming from conflict-affected states, so responsible sourcing from conflict-affected states. And they weren't asking questions about workers' rights, and they certainly weren't asking questions in relation to the subcontracted labor within that industry. And as a result, while on paper the architecture looked very thorough, what we found was that huge gaps existed. And it led us to a number of kind of key issues, which I think are important for those on the call. One was the narrow application of different human rights and labor rights principles. So in this particular case, huge focus on child labor, but not on subcontracted labor or workers' rights. Secondly, an over-reliance on social audits. And this really, from a human rights perspective, I'm a human rights activist, have worked in Africa for over 20 years. The kind of weaknesses in social audits is something we all need to be aware of. You have to have better engagement with stakeholders. You have to ensure social audits are fully transparent, even though that might be uncomfortable. But unless communities, those affected, can see what the results of these social audits are, not the kind of anodyne summaries that are often published, but full publication of social audits so that there can be scrutiny of those, I think we will continue to see many of these issues being papered over or frankly not coming to the light of day. And I would say the other weakness we found was an over-reliance on industry schemes. That's a whole other separate topic, which Stefan might be worth touching on if you'd like me to. But industry schemes are largely run by the industries. So they are often outsourced by other people in the supply chain who will say, I'll go to an industry scheme such as the London Bullion Market Association for gold, for example, or the industry scheme run by the Cobalt Institute, but these cannot replace due diligence requirements by an individual company. You cannot outsource to social auditors. One shouldn't outsource to industry schemes. Actual checking down to, in this particular case, the mine site was absolutely essential. One of Stefan's questions to me when we were thinking about this panel was, okay, so we see that there's still lots of weaknesses, but how do we move this forward where collaboration can make a difference? And here I'll just give you one example, and happy to talk further about this if it's of interest. But one of the key problems we found was the extremely low pay for these thousands of subcontracted laborers working to mine the cobalt for our energy transition. And in part, that is a competitive market, of course. And in part, it's companies actually being aware of what the exploitation means for workers. And of course, it means lots of people can't send their children to school. They live on one meal a day or less. It has huge impacts on the local communities. And this is, I think, where both electric vehicle companies and the mines in this particular case working together to say, what can we do to implement a living wage? What can we do together to raise that bar, which as an individual company, one is unlikely to be able to do, but where joined collaborative action in this particular case could make a huge and significant impact. Raising, in this case, the living wage in this particular example to $480 a month, incredibly low, I know, and one that should be easy to achieve, requires multi-stakeholder and collaborative approaches between both the end users, in this case electric vehicle companies, and the mines themselves. And I think that could make a huge positive impact. So there are a range of other areas where collaboration could and should make a big difference. But I suppose I want to leave those of you who work on developing these kind of due diligence plans and the architecture just with the need to go beyond just that tick box exercise, ensuring one is checking themselves, transparency on social audits, not an over-reliance on those auditing and industry schemes, and really constant involvement with end users and with stakeholders. I'm pleased to see that there's growing regulation on due diligence. I'm worried that that will result in more and more architecture and fancy reports and processes that don't necessarily have impact on the ground. And I think that's the challenge. How do we turn this to impact on the ground? So from our experience, that's just one bit of research that may be helpful for people. As I say, I'll put the report in the chat. And Stefan, happy to answer any further questions about that. Thank you.
I will look for that in the chat, but thank you already, Anneke. And you know that report, and just also for clarity to the audience, your report helped us to shape in the project that Luciana was describing, Extractis for Development, to engage with automotive sector who, I said they are in Wolfsburg or in Tokyo or wherever. We brought them to DRC, we engaged, and that thanks to, and that's my last speaker in the panel, Louis Watoum, as in his capacity as president of the Chamber of Mines, said, it's a good idea to bring all this together, and let's look into it. And one of the things we learned there, but Louis, you might contradict me later on that one, one of the things we noticed from a little bit of distance is we called it then the loneliness of large-scale mining. Each of the mine concessions trying to deal with social issues in one way or another at their best, some better than other, but there was no collaboration around it. That's why we focused so much on this by bringing the automotives there for them to understand better, Anneke, and that's what you also said. But also then it created this kind of dynamic where the Chambre des Mines played a key role in order to see what can we tackle. And then you say, of course, and one of the elements to look into it, the process just started, was indeed the relationship between the mines and the subcontractors. And that was, thanks to your report, I think we could include that. Louis Watum, it's very early morning for you in Canada, but I appreciate so much that you are there because you hear all these companies and what Anneke says, setting up architecture. You see the EU regulators setting up more requirements and also more. Anneke rightfully says she's afraid of more architecture, and we are trying to get impact. But you are upstream, and you are working with Ivanhoe Mines, but also I think in your capacity of president of the Chambre des Mines, what is the right direction for impact? That's our basic question to you, and I'm really thank you that you could make it this early for you. Please, Louis.
Yeah, no, thank you very much, Stefan, and happy to join the panel here. I think next time I travel to Toronto this time of the year, I should pack up a bit more good weather from my home country. It's getting cooler in this place, and I'm Black African. I like a warm climate. And thank you for all the organizers. You know, we go to webinars and to meetings and conferences, and sometimes we fail to acknowledge all the effort that goes beyond the scene. It's an entire team working tirelessly for days, weeks, sometimes months, to organize an event like this. So greetings to all of you there. And
it's the only way. I don't know anybody else.
And before I answer your question, Stefan, and I would like perhaps to give a bit of a flavor to my industry, which I believe remains very resilient. We're cruising in the tune of more than 2 million tons of copper per annum now. And when it comes to Ivanhoe Mines in particular, a lot of good news, really. As you know, we are a world-class leading producer, developer, and explorer in Africa, and all our projects and operations are going very well. Our flagship, Kamoa-Kakula, which is today is the world's fastest growing and highest grade copper mine in the world, is on track to achieve 650,000 tons of copper per annum starting last quarter of next year. Platreefs also is gearing up for first production in third quarter of next year. Same for Kipushi in the DRC. Kipushi is a polymetallic zinc, copper, germanium, and silver operation. And also in the pipeline, we have close to 2,400 square kilometers of land we're exploring to find more copper. As you know, today consumption of copper in the world is around 24 million tons. That will grow to 49 million tons in the next 10 years or so plus. And let's be clear here. There will not be a greener economy. There will not be a better world for our children if we don't find more copper, more critical minerals which are needed, like lithium, cobalt, manganese, and others. We have to find a way to find these metals. In fact, to put it very simply again, in the next 25 years, actually, we will need to find as much copper than the entire humanity has used since its existence on Earth, which is not an easy understanding. Knowing that for Kamoa-Kakula, for instance, it took clearly 26 years to get where we are today, to discover it and mine it. And so we have a lot of work ahead of us. We need to find a way to talk to stakeholders, to local communities, in the way that will make this possible. And you know, the world has changed today. When you look at the years around 2008 or so,
she's still in the session.
That's when we picked into integrating the world economy. That's when Toyota came with the just-in-time sort of a philosophy where the right screw gets for the right dashboard of a given Toyota car at just-in-time, and we moved from that to some form of a balkanization of supply chain in the world, because the world has become very complex. It has become VUCA, as we said. It's vulnerable, volatile, uncertain, and it's no longer just-in-time philosophy. It's just-in-case philosophy because of the security agenda. Because of all that, every country which can afford to domesticate and control its supply chain will do it, and hence this balkanization of the world economy and supply chain, and it comes to also the fact that mineral-rich countries like DRC need to see more going to the communities. Yes, I heard Anneke talking about all the abuse and exploitation, etc. But I think, yeah, we need to acknowledge that, of course. We cannot deny that. But I think not enough is being said about all the positive efforts happening today. Because, you know, talk is cheap. Huh? One is to shift gear, get into action. When you look at DRC today, first of all, I would like to clarify one thing also. When it comes to artisanal mining, there's a number of more or less 20% of production that is artisanal in DRC. It is completely a false a statement. I'm a mining operator. I've been 35 years in the industry. And I can tell you it's less than 5% actually artisanal mining happening in DRC when you look at copper and cobalt, for instance. I repeat, it's less than 5%. So why are they over extrapolating to 20%? I have no idea. But be that as it may, there's a lot of effort happening in sort of bringing sanity in this sector. You see the initiative for ECG for Cobalt Enterprises of Congo, the initiative on gold, artisanal gold with Primera Gold, with the Emiratis. All these are efforts to control the sector and make sure that it's clean and it's operating according to world-class standards. And all these efforts are not being acknowledged as much as they should, I believe. But also the efforts that major companies are doing in the DRC. If you look at the subcontractors, for instance, contractors and subcontractors, take the case of Kamoa Kakula, for instance. We have a number of contractors who started 10 years with us ago at very humble beginnings with turnovers of less than $50,000. Today, they are over $5 million, $10 million turnover per annum with us. But not only these contractors, we went down to the small farmers and turned them into successful entrepreneurs. We took a group of ladies who were really, really small farmers in local areas, taught them the basics of how to set up a business and run the business, and we funded them. And today they are manufacturing bricks that they are selling not only to the mines, but to the local communities with a turnover of annual turnover of $300,000, and they're employing people. And it is their business, 100% owned by these small farmers. We did the same with another group of farmers, turned them into successful entrepreneurs to set up gardens and lay good gardens. And they have a $500,000 turnover today. Same with those sewing overall clothing and etc. Not only for the mining industry, but also for any client that will come to them. almost to the tune of almost $350,000 US dollars turnover. So a lot of these sort of initiatives are happening, and that's not just Kamoa. Kibali in the northeast of the DRC in the gold sector is doing that. Glencore companies like Mumi, KCC, and others are doing the same. So there are a lot of good news happening, but we must not underestimate the real challenges here if you want to see things moving forward. We will never say it enough, the deficit of infrastructure in the DRC. When I say infrastructure, I mean the road.
Sorry, you got on mute in one way or another. Louis, let me see where I...
Oh, sorry.
You are back, you are back, you are back.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
Yeah. So I was saying some of the real challenges we need to look at to improve things forward is the deficit in energy, in infrastructure. But also, let's face it, the cost of doing business in the DRC is still very high because of these deficits, but also because of the bureaucracy and poor institutional capacity. Really serious effort is needed there.
Louis, can I interrupt you for a moment? Because also
yes.
we have to be I'm a little bit worried about time, but one thing that I wanted to ask you, we are mainly from a European perspective and from a downstream perspective. You have heard all these efforts, but what would be your explicit expectation related to this agenda? And you know, you were with the European Commission when they came during DRC Mining Week. Europe comes and says we want a partnership, and these are our standards. What is it that you expect from the downstream companies? Maybe not so much from the politics, but maybe from the downstream companies. What is it? Your expectation towards this direction that you want to go with mining and the potential of mining operation, because it's the downstream who will need your materials in any case.
Yes, I think every stakeholder must play its partition. Obviously, host countries like DRC, they have to come up with a regulatory framework and which is, you know, which has incentives for investments and stability of the tax regime, and they need to fight corruption and provide infrastructure, obviously. But you know, investment committees sitting in boards of companies who need to invest in DRC needs to understand a very simple truth, and I'll keep saying it to the risk of sounding like a stuck record. If you want to kill an elephant, you go to elephant country, period. This is what you do. You don't start having philosophical considerations about all kind of risks, which are true. You need to be practical in managing them. We cannot blame China today. China saw the opportunity. They brought capital and technology, and they found their own way to manage risk. And today they are doing what they're doing today, controlling more than 60% of the supply chain of all critical minerals needed for a green economy. This is what I expect from the Western world, but also a frank and honest and fair conversation and dialogue. If you look at the eastern part of Congo, for instance, we cannot carry on with the hypocrisy of seeing Western powers buying all the coltan and all the critical minerals needed for new technologies from neighboring countries, knowing very well under which condition they were mined in Congo, through the looting and the raping of women, etc., and still keep a clear conscience. This got to stop. If you want elephant, come to elephant country. If you want our coltan, come to Congo, and let's talk. And obviously, local communities also needs to we need to build the capacity to manage all the funds coming to them now, because the mining code is bringing a lot of money to them today. I mean, we're talking billions of dollars going to local communities today. They should be held accountable for this and have a long-term vision of what they're going to do with this to improve the lives of the population. Yeah.
Louis, thank you very much. I need to interrupt, but it was good to have your perspective and your view on all this agenda and what is needed. I need to thank, because we are close to 1 o'clock, I need to thank all my panelists, Lara, Luciana, Anneke, Louis, and then also Carlo for his keynote speech. But Amelie Werkbroek from SES, so as I mentioned, SES Satellites, one of our newest members, I would like to ask you, throwing you in the bath immediately, based on the story that you are making with SES Satellites on this agenda, what are the main learnings you took from this session? And so that might be, we can learn from SES, but also what you picked up from this session. So Amelie, and also thank you for supporting this event. So the floor is yours as kind of concluding remarks. Please. Amelie?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. So maybe just a quick explanation about SES Satellites, so you can also know about the sector we are working with. I would say. So SES Satellite is a satellite operator. We operate more than 70 satellites to provide services all over the world. So internet satellite connectivity, TV channel broadcasting, and so on. And so I will be really quick because I would say what we did last year, for example, was joining an accelerator program organized by the UN Global Compact, which is Business and Human Rights Accelerator. And so we went through the very same process that were explained to you by Carlo before the session, reviewing our due diligence process and reassessing our risk. And so during this process, we have also identified many challenges, and we have developed a draft action plan in order to kind of overcome this challenge. And so I see a lot of link with everything that was discussed today. I would say that what we found really interesting in participating in this kind of accelerator and program is not only the fact that by going through this program, you can go through this due diligence process with the help of experts, but more important is I would say the best practice sharing that you may have with the company that may be less, more, have the same, I would say, maturity than you. And it's also an opportunity to meet with this company to find synergy and maybe, I would say, potential incubation of collaborative program like the one that were presented today, like Jack or the Drive Sustainability, that just look amazing, that I would love to see in my space sector. It's also, I mean, challenges that we are seeing and that were shared also was often we see that we have some suppliers that are very, very good, big suppliers that are even more advanced than us, but we also see a large part of our suppliers that are smaller company, so that don't have always, this awareness on sustainability, that don't have always a full, let's say, pictures of their supply chain. And so with a lot of action that we're looking forward to put in place, like, for example, we were thinking about any content, training. So, I mean, webinar workshop that we will put in place for our own workforce. We would like, if it's possible, make it available to our suppliers to kind of raise this awareness and capacity building. We've already updated all supplier code of conduct, for example, to really strengthen SES commitment and make it more clear for suppliers the commitment we had into human rights protection. And of course, it's also really important for us to develop a new engagement channel, a new way to engage with the suppliers. And there, I'm just amazed with the presentation from Solvay and the supply the supplier days. I mean, that's just what we aim to achieve. I know that for the moment we're focusing on raising awareness and capacity building, but if at some point in the future we could move from this, requirement approach for a more mutual engagement approach, I think that's what we should all aim for. Another, I would say, it's not really a challenge, it's a demand that we are seeing more and more for employee. So as we are taking this more ESG approach, because we have developed a new ESG strategy last year based on a first materiality assessment that we have done. So we're trying to really align our ESG strategy with our business objectives. So as we are taking this approach and we are understanding more and more, I would say, our impact on the environment and the society, we want to change the way we are operating, and also the way we are engaging with the supply chain. And so we are seeing from our employee this demand for more advanced training, for more information. So we're planning to increase our employee engagement with more activities, workshop, expert invitation, and so on for meetings. So especially for human rights, so they can better align, I would say, this knowledge with what they have to do into their everyday job. We would like also to improve transparent reporting. It's really important, but it's not that easy to set up this KPI, and to really set up the KPI that will be really relevant and that will really help us to, I would say, track and monitor our progress. And then we have some, I would say, challenges that we know are, let's gonna say, just long-term challenges. For example, we have this lack of visibility. I mean, really at the very beginning of the value chain, at the very end of the chain. So as a satellite operator, we are very much in the middle. So we're doing B2B. So we never provide services to the end user. And also we know that the severe risk, they are there. So so that's certainly a challenges that will take time. And you have also sometimes, and I don't think it was mentioned today, a lack of leverage. So for example, space sector is a very, very small sector, but I think that other sectors share the same issue. And so sometimes for some technologies or some services, we have a very, very limited pool of suppliers. So the satellite, we're not manufacturing the satellite, for example. So we will look for a supplier, and there is only maybe 4 or 5 suppliers that can manufacture, that can build the satellite. Same if you want to launch them. So from time to time, we have only 2 or 5, between 2 and 5 suppliers available. And there, I mean, as a customer, on your own, it's really, really difficult to have leverage. And so it's why I see that listening today to what Anek said and what Louis said, it really demonstrates how, I would say, even if it was very, very different perspective from each other, it really emphasized this need to have, I would say, stronger stakeholder engagement. So it's where you see that it's really important what a company will develop on its own. I mean, the due diligence process that we put in place is really, really important, but we are most often limited in what we can see on your own, and it's really by, I mean, this continuous stakeholder engagement, this new approach that we have to take. So moving from requirement approach, from let's say this assessment, request for information, to really engage with them at some point, and also looking at this new, I mean, collaborative platform when you can work with your customer or with your peers in order to have a better impact and a concrete impact, I think, like Anek said, on the ground.
Thank you very much, Emily, and it was really good to have you as we were wondering, should we in the opening keynote, in the closing, but actually in the closing was perfect. Thank you very much, because sometimes when you show a system that is already well established, blah, 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 it looks, how did they make that? but it is a continuous work, and you highlighted also some of the challenges related to that. So thank you really for this openness. I think we are running over time already, so I need, if I can go to the next slide just to close off. Yes. Actually, it's an advertising slide because on 16th of November, it's not an event. Well, it's an event at the EIT Raw Materials Week, but there, CSR Europe and Drive Sustainability will launch what we discussed and also the work that was guided by Louis Watum on local sustainability networks as a way to shape collaboration to tackle some of the issues that were mentioned also with Anneke. So if you are interested in those, please tune in on the 16th at the EU EIT Raw Materials. And then in the next slide, but we will send them in any case through, there are a number, there are all these requirements, and we did not, on purpose, we did not want to explain all the EU requirements, etc., in again another webinar. But if you seek support on that, or if you want to discuss, especially on the EU alignment or on grievance, you will find us to support you on this one. All my Carlo, the panelists, Luciana, Laura, Anneke, Louis, and Amelie, thank you very much for being with us. Thank you for the audience for engaging that much. I see here a question on the name of the UN Global Compact Accelerator. I Googled it this morning. If you Google that, you will find it. It's per country in Europe. It looks very interesting, I must say, but Amelie can also maybe provide you more information on that. If you have a minute, please take the survey and share your feedback. That will help us to further improve our event. And thank you so much for being in this webinar. And see you soon in another one. Thank you very much. Have a nice day.